Hi, today I would like to talk about a very, important topic because I've been affected by it and I have a dual diagnosis, which is borderline, BPD or borderline personality disorder. And if you want to find out what the symptoms are, 5 myths about borderline personality so we can bust stigma and characteristics and the psychological definitions and how you can cope in a healthy, resilient way, and what is the key to that will set you free and help you manage this. So if you're ready to find out, stay tuned. So borderline personality disorder is characterized by a prolonged disturbance in someone's mood. And it's also characterized by a varied and depth in disturbance in mood. Lacking acceptance of gray areas, borderline personality disorder is also characterized by the tendency to label areas with labels in either white or black. So basically good and bad, nice, not nice. So it's just either one or the other. We might also prefer to be avoiding of outside stimulation. And we also try to avoid any positive stimulation because of the fear of abandonment or disappointment. So for example, we can go from feeling an intense love and then an extreme fear of abandonment, and then we can be obsessive love and then suddenly we feel like we need to run. We frequently experience uncontrolled anger and anxiety. Even if most people are able to have simultaneous and even contradictory emotions at the same time, the borderline can either be placed at one side at a time. While there's not a lot known about borderline personality because it's relatively new, it is a lot of people are being affected by this. It's not usually diagnosed, but it's also characterized by the strong tendency of impulsivity, and this can be self-damaging. For example, if we're having a prolonged anger and impulsivity, we might speed or drive recklessly or just have behaviors that are reckless and overdrink or overeat, things that have a danger characteristic because of the recklessness and impulsivity. Also, we have crying spells, and sometimes they're often inappropriate situations and sometimes not, or sometimes we require, like, the events require have that emotional response and we don't have it. A borderline will also have difficulty to experience joy for a prolonged period of time, so we just have a little, so we have like a little short-lived excitement. We also exhibit weak abilities to sustain prolonged relationship, and we also have like paranoid thinking sometimes when someone, like this happens a lot to me, where I see someone who I think they're good and then they do something that, and I completely like demonize them and see there's no turn from that. So even though this video is not intended to diagnose or cure anything, and you can see the disclaimer at bossofmyfeelings.com, a diagnosis requires 5 out of 9 criteria to be present at a given time for a significant amount of time. And because of that, there's 256 possible combinations of these symptoms that can result into a diagnosis. So the first one is frantic efforts to avoid abandonment. The second is a pattern of unstable relationship. Third one is impulsivity in areas that are possibly self-damaging. The fourth is disassociation and having a hard time having a stable self-image or sense of self. And the fifth one is having recurrent suicidal thoughts, gestures, threats, self-mutilating, and even chronic feelings of emptiness. Frequent displays of anger and temper and maybe fights and paranoid ideation. So one of the good to add some balance to this one of the good characteristics is that borderline, we tend to be, or borderline people tend to be very kind, and we love innocent childlike things, and we're great with babies, for example. And the founder of DBT, which is the therapy that was designed specifically for borderline, though it is recommended for either if you're highly sensitive or if you just want to build your emotional intelligence. It's very helpful, and I think everyone should learn these skills because they really help you cope in a healthy, resilient way. However, they were originally designed for borderline. Creator is Marsha Linehan, and she describes it as we feel emotions as intensely as having a second-degree burn. So it's a group of people that respond more sensitively to events. So that's the great news, is that it is treatable and you can learn these skills. And, you know, like I always talk about brain plasticity and the great findings of neuroscience, we're basically, by practicing these cognitive therapies, we're actually training our brain and creating new neural paths, with each more than hope. It is actually great, and we're powerful in the decisions we make today. So if we start learning DBT, for example, and some skills, we're actually altering and participating in restoring the healthy chemistry of our brain. So this allows us to have more control over our reactions. So it's like building your emotional intelligence muscles, because before you make a decision, before you do something, there's a time that before you react, you analyze and do some introspection, and from that self-analysis, which is unbiased and very honest, you will be able to, before you make a decision, you evaluate the consequences or outcome. So instead of overreacting, this allows us to regroup. And this is great because it allows us to regulate our emotions, and that's why DBT was created in the way it was. That is the stress tolerance, emotion regulation, meditation and DBT, and interpersonal relations. So this is a great therapy because you can implement it in the long term, and the secret is to be consistent. So let's bust 5 myths about borderline personality so we can bust stigma. So people with BPD have the tendency, that's myth number 1, of violent individuals and harming others. That's a myth because someone with borderline will go at great lengths to avoid hurting anyone, even if it's at the cost of hurting themselves. There's a tendency of giving up your happiness to see others happy. So we will sacrifice our own needs and wants for others. We will go out of our way to take care of others because of that fear of abandonment. So we do anything to hold on to those relationships. And we will avoid anything that will put us at risk of having those relationships reject us. So we'd rather hurt ourselves than hurt anyone else. So we direct that anger inward. Myth number 2 is that people with BPD, borderline personality disorder, are manipulative. That's another myth. So sometimes, it might seem like we're attention seeking, but we're actually, because our behaviors of our borderline are difficult to understand because of the intensity of them, and it's hard for anyone to comprehend, why would someone engage in such self-harm behaviors, for example. So it's incomprehensible for others, and to see someone engaging in them, it can be shocking and scary. And because of these behaviors, we evoke such an intense response to others, so they have ironically led to the belief that we are just manipulative or seeking attention. But you can't infer a person's intentions by their actions or symptoms. So the problem with this way of thinking is that you can't infer a person's intentions based on their effects of his or her behavior. For example, someone is like saying that someone with BPD attempts suicide, it's like to get attention is relatively equal to saying, oh, someone ran the red light to hit a pedestrian. So it doesn't really tell us why someone will engage in such behavior. The myth number 3 is that borderline is a life sentence. And this is a myth that came because, it's kind of relatively new. So at the beginning, when it was starting to get diagnosed, and these people, it was a life sentence because there wasn't anything at the time, but now there is DBT and so many other cognitive therapies that we can learn, so it is treatable. And the last myth is that borderline is caused by bad parenting. So not everyone that has been diagnosed with borderline had a bad childhood or bad parents, though being neglected as a child or abused plays a big role in developing borderline personality disorder. Not everyone that develops it has had this experience. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and also visit bossofmyfeelings.com because I'm planning on creating a webinar just on DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and I will also make a short video, but the webinar will be 60 minutes explanation of what it is and how you can implement it in your life, so don't miss out. And don't forget to share your friends or tag someone who you think might benefit from this information. Would you like to find out what's sabotaging your life? Take the quiz. Click there and answer a couple questions and you will get your free guide. It's a customized guide. You will get your customized result to match your answers. You can also text at 44222 and get my top 7 favorite transformational books that I highly recommend. I will also be putting a link for the guide if you're interested below. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video and write in the comments if there's a specific topic you would like me to make a video about, if there's something in personal development, or if you're curious about how to build your emotional intelligence, post it below.